and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in His own image. Can you imagine man being created in God's image? Do you think there might have been some glory that was present in the person of Adam himself? When you looked at Adam, would you think you would see God's glory? Absolutely. That's why I think after he sinned and he was naked, you know how he knew he was naked? The glory was gone. And he was like you and I. Death. The image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful, and multiply and replenish the earth, and, what's that next word? Subdue. Anybody ever done wrestling when they were in school? Yeah. I didn't do it very long. It was too hard. I went back to football, which was a lot easier. Subdue. What do you do when you subdue somebody? First of all, they're in opposition to you. You've got to get an advantage and take over. And put them in what position? Subjection under you, just like my dog when I go run. She's in subjection to who? Me. And have dominion over all the creation. Dominion, that's a position of being the king. The ruler over what? A small section of the earth, the Holy Land, garden in the east of Eden, over the whole earth. So keep in mind that in Genesis 14, possessor of heaven and earth. Okay? Come back to Hebrews, and we're going to spend some time in the book of Psalms here in just a few moments. Book of Hebrews, chapter 2. Actually, yeah, Hebrews chapter 4. Hold your hand in Hebrews 2 and come over to Hebrews chapter 4, verse 1. It's interesting. There's several warnings. This is one of them that's in the book of Hebrews. When God uses the writer of Hebrews to give warning, He gives a historic perspective that Israel can look back at and go, yeah, that's what they did. Here's what the believing remnant did. Here's what the unbelieving did. And here's how God dealt with it. So think about that as you're waiting. And guess what? Everybody that read this was written to, that was alive at the time, they weren't going to enter into the kingdom during their lifetime. They were going to have to look for what? Same thing Abram looked for. Resurrection to be able to enter in. Okay? Hebrews chapter 4, verse 1. Let us therefore fear, lest a promise being left us of entering into His rest, any of you should seem to come short of it. When you think of rest, what do you think about in the Jewish calendar? Sabbath. The seventh day where God rested was the first example. It's interesting. We're not going to go there this month. If I do that, I'll surely confuse you. Interestingly, God's perspective with Adam before the law was given, what was there? There was a Sabbath. There was a rest day. The seventh day, God set up the Sabbath long before the law ever showed up. What was that Sabbath teaching Israel? Did they only have a Sabbath once every week, or did they have many others? Many others. When you go to Colossians 2, Sabbaths, plural, are no longer there. So when you look at the Sabbath, it was to teach them something, that they're going to be resting in God. Now, does Paul use that term with us? I've looked at this 3 times, I think, in the last 6 weeks. I mean, rest. Does he use that term, rest? Remember 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, he says, rest with us when? We have a rest for us too, but this particular rest has to do with the establishment of their dominion over the earth as a nation, the ruling. That's what they call, and we normally call, the millennial period. That's just an inaugural period for the eternal kingdom God's going to have on the earth. And guess who's going to rule over the earth? It's going to be Israel. Now, I grew up in South Florida. Okay? You know what I can tell you about dealing with Jews in South Florida? The only thing they understood is if you ripped them off, they respected you. If you were honest with them, they could get an advantage of you. They didn't respect you. It was not a pleasant experience dealing with Jews in the Miami area, South Florida. That's unbelieving Israel. There's some things that are identified for them. Entering into whose rest? His rest. That rest that he promised them. Leviticus 26, he said, if you disobey, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to curse you. And he goes through all those 5 courses of judgment, cursing. Then he comes out after that and he said, but when it's all over with, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn around and do for you what you couldn't do for yourself. I'm going to give you that rest. Put you into that rest by writing Jeremiah 31 and Ezekiel, writing into your heart the law. Internal, so it makes an impact, not just in your thinking and your dress and the robe and the factory prayers and all that foolishness, but who you are, what I designed you to be. So Hebrews chapter 4, verse 1, let us therefore fear lest a promise left us of entering into his rest. Now, to enter into the rest for a Jew, what that means is one thing. Kingdom. A kingdom of priests, a holy nation. You know what it means to be able to enter into them? It means everything. Can you have eternal life and not enter into the ruling and reigning with Christ as a saint today? Absolutely. Why would we think it'd be a strange thing for what we classically call an Old Testament saint to have eternal life but not enter into this rest? Fail. Fall by the wayside. Can I tell you one of the most important things in all of God's creation? It's one of the 5 things that are laid out in the book of Genesis in the first 11 chapters. Volition. When God created the angelic hosts that are morally accountable, God gave them free will, volition. You know what he gave Adam? You know what he gave Eve? I have to learn your little skit on Eve before it's all over with. I can't do it very well, but I want to know it by the time I get to Chicago in the summer in case I get pitched. I'll probably be in big trouble if I do that. I don't care.
It's a good idea. Explains a lot.
Yeah, it makes a lot of bad assumptions, but it is kind of funny. I lost my HO train of thought. The gospel that was preached to them about the good news is that they will enter into that position of being the nation above all nations. Because there's going to be nations through eternity. Y'all know that, right? Be the nation, to be a kingdom of priests there to go between the Creator and the creation to communicate His mind. They shall all, in Zechariah chapter 12, they go up and grab the garment of a Jew. So we want to know your God. So they are going to be the vehicle of that understanding to the nations. But guess what? For unto us was the gospel preached as well as unto them. What gospel was preached unto them in the wilderness? This is what we're going to be talking about. What did Moses tell them? That you will be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation? What is Christ telling them in Matthew 4:23? Preach unto them the kingdom. What kingdom? Same one Moses told them. It was preached unto them, and what? You had the spies go into the land. How many of them went in and came back and said, no, we can't do it? All of them but 2, right? So God gave them judgment for 40 years. The believing remnant was 2, and the unbelieving was, well, let's see what happens. But the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. For we which have believed do enter into rest, as he has said, and so on and so forth. In the wilderness, they fell short. They never entered into the rest. What did they do? When God put them in the wilderness, the unbelieving did what while they're in the wilderness? They all died. The carcasses laid in the wilderness. Who went in? Joshua and Caleb. The believing remnant went in, and those that were under a certain age by that time. So when we go back, look at Hebrews chapter 2 again.